It's about to be a phenomenal show. I got to get right to it. That is Dave Hellman, NFL Insider. This is the brilliant Joy Taylor and Eagles all-time rushing leader, LaShawn Shady McCoy. Well, let's get to it. Zack Wilson, starting quarterback for the New York Jets. Well, I guess I can say former starting quarterback for the Jets, benched yesterday. Remember, second overall pick. This is crazy. This is something you do not see in football. But call me crazy because I've been thinking everybody is blaming Zack Wilson. And rightfully so, he's been bad. But I find it easier to believe that the Jets are more at fault than Zack Wilson. Here is why. Think about young quarterbacks with defensive-minded coaches. It literally never works. Robert Saleh is the head coach for the Jets, defensive mind. It's no surprise Zack Wilson's failing, not because Zack Wilson, but because that's a terrible combination. Tua Tagovailoa, when Brian Flores was his coach, that didn't work. Sam Darnold with Todd Bowles, that didn't work. Josh Rosen with Steve Wilks, that didn't work. Let's go back a couple years, shall we? Vince Young with Jeff Fisher, that didn't work. Jared Goff with Jeff Fisher, that didn't work. But you think about Tua with Mike McDaniel, oh wow, how that worked. Think about the flip side. Joe Burrow with Zack Taylor, wow, that worked. Patrick Mahomes with Andy Reid turned into one of the greatest combinations in NFL history at this very early age and stage. Maybe it's not just that Zack Wilson is bad. Maybe there is a correlation between defensive-minded head coaches and young quarterbacks, or even more importantly, maybe it is causation that defensive-minded head coaches, historically speaking, with young quarterbacks, it will never work. Take the low-hanging fruit if you want to. Take the low-hanging fruit that says Zack Wilson just forgot how to play football, or do a little bit more digging, and you might see that the defensive-minded head coaches are truly to blame for young quarterbacks failing early. Dave Hellman, you got fruit. I'm not going to call you Adam nor Eve, but don't. But make sure you pick the right one. Is Zack Wilson to blame for the situation, or who's to blame?
For somebody that did a lot of digging, you left off the part where Justin Herbert's head coach is a defensive coordinator.
Not his rookie year.
How about the fact Lamar Jackson was drafted by a special teams coordinator? That's an NFL MVP. I think it's just about whether or not you're a good quarterback. I'll meet you here.
Meet me.
I'll meet you here. A lesser quarterback can be made to look better by a great coach.
Yep.
You know, if you're in a good scheme, if they're doing the right things for you, if they're surrounding you with the right players, calling the right plays, it can help. If you're the man, it doesn't matter. And it shouldn't matter if you're drafted number 2 overall. I mean, that's just how I feel. And look, I think there's validity to what you're saying. I mean, the Jets drafted him number 2 overall. There were questions about his pedigree against the best of the best coming out of BYU. That's all totally fair. The bottom line is, this is the NFL. Zack Wilson wanted to be drafted as highly as possible. Doesn't like Shady, I'm sure you felt some type of way about where you were drafted, right? Like every player thinks they should have been drafted higher unless they were drafted number 1.
Hey, wait, we're not friends.
Oh, hey. Come on now. Don't do that to me.
We're not friends. It's Cowboy.
We're talking about the Jets.
It's Cowboy Eagle.
It's Cowboy Eagle.
Doesn't matter. Right. He's got the green on. That's fine.
That's right.
Most players, all right, I'm sorry, Shady. Most players want to be drafted as highly as possible. So when it happens and it doesn't work out, you can say all that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's on you to deliver. And we've seen quarterbacks deliver. That's the job. That's the job description.
Here's what's not fair to me, though, Joy, is I think about the only quarterback in that class we have confidence in at this point in time is Trevor Lawrence. Only quarterback in that class. Not Justin Fields, not Mac Jones, not Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence. But Trevor Lawrence has Doug Peterson. The same Doug Peterson that took Carson Wentz in Carson Wentz's second year to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The same Doug Peterson that took Nick Foles to a Super Bowl MVP. The same Doug Peterson that has made other quarterbacks look brilliant.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Joy, that it's just talent can overcome all odds. But what say you? Who's to blame for Zack Wilson's struggle?
Well, Trevor Lawrence had an offensive coach his first year. Didn't overcome that.
Did not.
Did not overcome that. You have Sean McDermott, who's a defensive coach in Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Belichick is probably the greatest example of a defensive coach that had a lot of success. Brady was a young quarterback when he went there. He drafted him.
Yep.
Staley, obviously. Flores didn't work out, but he did have back-to-back winning seasons with Tua. And Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season and had Ben Roethlisberger at the beginning of his career. So I don't think that it's necessarily an indictment of a defensive head coach. I would agree with you. It's easier. It's more beneficial. I would tend to have an offensive coach if I'm hiring a new coach at the point in which I'm drafting a young quarterback. But the blame can be spread around pretty evenly here. And it's not entirely on Zack or the Jets, because what did you say yesterday, Shady? You said we get paid to play football.
Mm-hmm. That's the deal.
That's the deal.
That's the contract.
You give me money, I go play football.
That's right.
This is work. You give me money, I talk on television. That's what we do. This is the job. So in college, it's different. High school, it's different. This is not volunteer service. Like, you are a professional now. You've been taken at the highest level. You have expectations of you at the highest level, and that should be fair, because you're also compensated at the highest level for that. Obviously, we have nuance to it, but I can't just lay this on Zack Wilson entirely. I think you do have to go out and play and perform. That's his fault. I think you have to be a leader. He certainly hasn't shown that. The rest of the teammates don't seem to like him. They've been pretty upfront about how they feel about the position, particularly when they switched over to Mike White. But where I will go with you with the Jets is, you're selecting a CEO of your company when you're drafting a quarterback. It's more than just skill. It's more than just skill set for your scheme. Who's this person? What's their life experiences? What have they been around in college? This is New York City. The media's changed a little bit now. It's obviously more international. With the internet, you have access to a lot of different things. But New York is still New York. The New York media is still the New York media. And you're taking a kid from BYU and inserting him into a very high-stress situation still. It's almost equivalent to the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe not in the publicity nationwide, but in the city, in New York, that's a hard place for a young kid to go. Has he played on the highest stage? Has he had that kind of pressure on him? Has he been able to do those kind of interviews and be in those kind of environments to be able to step right in and be a leader of a team, of an organization in New York? I think you have to do a level deeper when you decide who you're drafting. You're drafting a person. And so I can't absolve Zack Wilson from the blame for what's happened, but I also can understand why this hasn't really worked out. I was surprised when the Jets took him.
Where you stand, 2-5? Who you blaming?
I'm with Joy, right? I'm going to blame the organization, right? I think Sal's a hell of a coach. He's done a good job. He's a defensive coach, and you can see that. You talked about Sean McDermott and Josh Allen and that whole thing. If you're going to be a defensive coach, I get it. They're going to draft defense. And then you always try to go out there and get your franchise quarterback if you need one. But then you get him a solid offensive coordinator. Yep. Brian Daboll. It's not a surprise that Danny Dimes, I like to call him Danny Dimes, is doing good in New York. He has a hell of an offensive coordinator. Doug Peterson, you talked about him with the Eagles and with Carson Wentz. I mean, at one point in time, we thought Carson Wentz was an MVP candidate, right? So Trevor Lawrence last night, he looked good. If you didn't watch the game, you see the numbers like, wow, he played a great game. But if you really watch it and dissect it, that was one of the most safe, conservative offense for a young quarterback. Yep. Right? The way they ran the ball, misdirection, the little quick passes, the quick passing game, like all of things can help a quarterback. So now, when I was playing, I will always joke, but you know how I am, I'm outspoken. I would talk to head scouts, to GMs. I would talk about different players they would draft high. Like you're going on a limb to take this kid. If the kid don't work out, they blame it on, he couldn't grasp the offense. Mm-hmm. You know, the city was too big for him. New York, the Jets, the lights were too big in New York. No, you drafted this guy. Get him players and get the coaching for this player so he can succeed.
That's where I'm at. Is like, even when I think about the greatest defensive mind, maybe greatest head coach in all of football, Bill Belichick, Mac Jones does not look like a bona fide franchise guy.
At all.
Like, when I'm thinking about it right here and now, conversely, Kyle Shanahan took the last pick in the draft. And Brock Purdy, we're all looking at him like, Brock Purdy, he might be a viable starter next year for the Niners. I'm sitting here like, Zack Wilson clearly is not performing great. But, Dave, I think it is unfair to the player, and maybe I'm biased because I was one. I think it's unfair to the player to say, well, if you're that talented, you're going to make it shake. Because we just don't see that happen in this NFL. You see the great players become great because their coaches offensively, even Josh Allen, his first 20 games, 20 touchdowns, 19 interceptions, and he was 11-9. Even Josh Allen, who had Brian Daboll when he showed up, he still didn't just hit the ground in stride. Yep. That's why I don't just blame it on Zack.
He got better and better.
But and to be clear, neither do I. But I think a lion's share lies with the quarterback when you look at what the Jets have done for him. Like, Justin Fields is a great comparison because it's the same draft class, and you can look at the Bears and say, what have the Bears done to put Justin Fields in a favorable situation. I mean, they traded for Chase Claypool halfway through this season. Darnell Mooney's a decent player. David Montgomery's a pretty good running back. The offensive line is a mess. Now go look at the Jets and you say, well, they just drafted Garrett Wilson. He's a beast. They used a draft pick on Elijah Moore. They used a draft pick on on Breece Hall. He did get hurt.
Yep.
They also drafted Michael Carter, the UNC running back.
Yep.
They went and got Dwayne Brown at left tackle when Mekhi Becton got hurt. Like, they have put resources into this being a pretty good offense, and it just doesn't look like that. We do this to Russell Wilson all the time.
Yep.
Check this out. This is crazy. The Jets they've allowed more than 20 points one